Today, for our 8th class, we will be reflecting on language and identity, and we will do so working with the text by Gloria Anzaldúa called Borderlands, La Frontera, which was a very influential work published on the 80s. Gloria Anzaldúa is a scholar on Chicano culture and literature, but also on queer studies and on feminist studies, who was also a poet and an activist. And I think you can see different parts of that in the text we read for today. For today, we read chapter 5 of the book called How to Tame a Wild Tongue, where Anzaldúa reflects on different forms of violence against her language or her languaging or her linguistic practices. This violence comes from different contexts that she mentions in this chapter. She mentions school, college, family, also Spanish language institutions, and finally other Chicanos and Latinos. She introduces something that she calls the tradition of silence that she has experimented because of her gender as a woman, as a Chicana, also because of ideas of normativity, so all of the purist ideas some institutions and people defend about language, about what is correct, what is incorrect, and also the relationship between this normativity and English colonization and also Spanish colonization. That from all of these different notes, this tradition of silence emerges. Then Anzaldúa goes on to reflect on what she calls Chicano Spanish. And I think this is one of the most important ideas of the text, and it's her insistence on the fact that Chicano Spanish is not incorrect, it's alive, it's a living language. And she explains the emergence of this living language. She says, for a people who cannot entirely identify with either standard Spanish nor standard English, what recourse is left to them but to create their own language? A language which they can connect to their identity, one capable of communicating their realities and values true to themselves, a language that is neither Espanol nor English, but both. And let's go back to the title of the book, Borderlands, La Frontera, this idea of the borders, of the in-between, and this hybrid identity, this hybrid language, this culture, like the ocean, she says, doesn't respect borders. Then, in this text, Anzaldúa establishes different relationships, and I know a lot of you were very interested in the topic of language and identity and reflected about this in your own linguistic biographies. And here, Anzaldúa is trying to create connections between what language is and what home means for her. Again, in connection to the language, Chicano Spanish for her sprang out of Chicanos' need to identify ourselves as a distinct people. We needed a language with which we could communicate with ourselves, a secret language, and this language is a homeland closer than the Southwest or closer than our territory for us. And again, she plays with this idea of home, saying that her home tongue are the languages that she speaks with her family members, with her friends. And this connects to the ending of the text, in which she further reflects on how we construct our identity, how we internalize our different identification. And language plays a role in all of these areas, but also she mentions movies, music, food, smells, sound, and how all of those cultural processes are connected or traversed through language and are part of the way in which we construct our own identity. In connection with this idea of that the language that she speaks and Chicanos speak is not incorrect, she reflects on the idea of language shaming and on the fact that people, Chicanas who grow up speaking Chicano Spanish, what she calls Chicano Spanish, have internalized the belief that they speak poor Spanish, illegitimate Spanish. In your linguistic biography, a lot of you mentioned broken Spanish, broken English, or other languages or varieties. But this idea of speaking an incorrect language, an illegitimate language, And she goes on, because we internalize how our language has been used against us by the dominant culture, we use our language difference against each other. And then she goes to the fundamental idea of the text, that if a person has a low estimation of my native tongue, she also has a low estimation of me, because language and identity are very connected. So if you want to really hurt me, talk badly about my language. Ethnic identity is twin skin to linguistic identity. I am my language. And until I can take pride in my language, I cannot take pride in myself. So I hope you enjoy this text. I also want you to focus and pay attention to the way this text is written and think about the reasons why Anzaldúa has decided to write this text like this. Thank you for watching this video. Bye bye.